Support for Central Florida Public Media comes from the Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University Worldwide Campus, providing students from all 50 states and 119 countries with innovative education and opportunities for success. More at erau.edu/ww.
I'm Sharon Stone. This is Engage. A group of Central Florida faith leaders gathered at the office of Orange County Supervisor of Elections Karen Castor-Dental on the morning of July 7th to address concerns regarding the upcoming elections and policies threatening voting rights. The message of the 9 clergy members was clear.
We are coming together today to affirm the importance of the ability for each eligible voter to be able to exercise their constitutional right to vote freely and fairly to elect our leaders.
Reverend Sarah Robinson is a pastor at Audubon Park Church in Orlando, vice president of the board at Hope Community Center in Apopka, and co-founder of the Faith Leader Network of the Immigrants Are Welcome Here Coalition.
We're here because we are alarmed by attempts to interfere with the election process and are announcing as clergy we will be active to protect our collective rights to vote and to call on our elected officials at all levels of government, nonpartisan and partisan, to join us in our pledge to protect our freedom to vote.
Robinson was joined by 8 other members of the local clergy to bring attention to a letter penned by the Faith in Us, a nonprofit collective of clerical leaders from various faiths advocating for free and fair elections. The letter is signed by more than 2,200 faith leaders across the country and directly addresses policies they say restrict or prevents access for eligible voters. Father Jerry De Jesus is a retired priest and theologian and an adjunct faculty member at Union Theological Seminary. De Jesus began the press conference by reading from the letter.
We are deeply concerned about the executive order severely restricting vote by mail, and we are outraged by the rapid gerrymandering of racially discriminatory election maps in many states following the recent Supreme Court's decision to end the Voting Rights Act commitment to racial equality in elections.
The letter goes on to articulate specific issues that could compromise a clean election.
Complicated registration rules, fewer voting options, threats to deploy ICE to polling places, barriers based on financial ability, requests that states turn over voting rolls despite privacy and security concerns, and discriminatory gerrymandering of maps all offend our core faith values as well as core democracy values.
Pastor Socrates Perez is a MICA catalyst with Undivided. He works with churches to cultivate programs for accepting immigrants into their communities. He sees a pattern of voter suppression through American history.
We are struck by an alarming dissonance when we hear talk of measures that would deter and dilute the people's voice. When we learn about efforts to intimidate or complicate a fair voting process and to cast doubt on election results, we hear echoes of a tragic national history of unequal representation, of poll taxes and literacy tests, of a time when it was acceptable to nullify the voices of some in favor of others.
William Cavins is the Bishop Ordinary of the Diocese of Our Lady Queen of Martyrs Reformed Catholic Church and pastor of Abiding Faith Community in Orlando. He described the clerical collective's expectations of elections administrators.
We call on local, state, and federal elected officials, especially those who administer elections and certify results, to sign the Faith in the United States pledge to protect our freedom to vote. We ask them to follow the United States Constitution and state election laws, to refuse unlawful orders or data requests that restrict voting, and to faithfully certify, seat, and the rightfully elected winners both this August and in November, regardless of party.
Pastor Robinson, with translation assistance from Pastor Perez, wrapped up the press conference by offering advice to those who take threats of ICE presence at polling locations seriously and may feel too intimidated to vote.
If you are concerned about voting on election day,
Si tienes preocupación de votar el día de las elecciones,
either August 18th or November 3rd,
o el día 18 de agosto o el 3 de noviembre,
make a plan to vote by mail or vote early
hagan un plan para votar o por el correo o para votar temprano
at one of the many early voting locations in the county.
en uno de los locales de votar en el condado, que hay muchos.
In other words, make a plan.
En otras palabras, hagan un plan anteriormente.
Anderline Brady with Whole Life Seventh-day Adventist Church in Orlando is concerned that her congregation is going into election season misinformed or not informed at all.
They are unaware of all of the things that are happening in our community. There is this sort of comfort that they know they're registered, but they're not recognizing that they need to re-register as well. So bringing awareness and education has become part of the journey for us.
Whole Life Seventh-day Adventist has a considerable immigrant membership, and Brady says that when it comes to voting, that lack of information is especially stressful.
Those who are marginalized are expressing a lot of fear and anxiety with regards to their status as either Haitian American or Hispanics of all kinds. They don't quite know whether or not they can go forward with voting, and so there's a lot of anxiety and fear about what is available to them and what can they do.
Pastor Perez says he's also seeing that anxiety with the Latino congregations he works with, and it's translating to a lack of trust with leaders from the community level all the way to DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin.
When ICE comes up in the conversation, even voters that are citizens who are Latino have experienced, profiling and part of the collaboration of the police departments pulling over people and being deputized to do ICE work. So when ICE gets brought up and into the picture, when questions are clearly asked of the DHS that say, "Are you going to rule out ICE presence?" and he refuses to do that, those are similar tactics of what we have seen in past decades, but towards Latino voters. And so we just want to make sure that people feel secure and safe in voting.
Perez says there is one proposed piece of federal legislation that he fears would do the most damage in disenfranchising voters.
The Save America Act is one of the things being proposed by the president, who has put on there that proof of citizenship and a proof of citizenship barrier being necessary to vote, and maybe showing up at the ballot box or doing that in your registration. And while everybody must be a citizen, some of those documents that are being asked for are birth certificates or are passports. And from the stats that I read recently, 10% of the people in the U.S. do not have those documents. And so it just creates barriers for people. It can create barriers for women who've been married and haven't changed those, or for more impoverished voters that might not have access to those documents and anymore.
On Tuesday, House Republicans passed a procedural motion that would open up floor debate and final vote on a number of measures, including the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility, or SAVE Act. If passed, the law would set a national standard for voter eligibility, requiring voters to provide proof of citizenship and photo ID for all voters in all American elections. The act would also place stricter limits on mail-in voting eligibility and require the maintenance of a federal voter database. Critics of the SAVE Act contend that citizenship is already a requirement, and it is rare for non-citizens to vote. Access to required documents can be problematic for voters, and there are concerns that legal name changes that do not match birth certificates could disenfranchise voters, including married women who have taken their spouse's last name. The bill had stalled in the Senate without the votes to pass. Republican House members are looking to pair it with a vital defense budget bill in hopes of pushing it through the Senate with enough time to enact it before the November midterm elections. Republican U.S. Representative Randy Fine represents Floridians from St. Augustine to New Smyrna Beach. He spoke with Engage producer Richard Copeland about why he supports the SAVE Act and why he would like to see restrictions on mail-in voting.
It's insecure. And I think there's certainly different ways to do it. So, for example, in California, they send a mail-in ballot to anyone who's ever been registered to vote. And so it gets flooded. Mail balloting is, by its very nature, not secure. You don't know who's filled out the ballot. You don't know who sent it back. The only security is a quote unquote signature, which 99% of the time is considered matched. So every third party group agrees mail-in balloting is not a secure way to vote. If it were up to me, we would only have mail-in balloting if people needed it as a vehicle because they're not able to go and vote in person. But that is the way it works in Florida right now, and that's not going to change for the election this year.
Is there evidence of fraud within mail-in?
Absolutely, massive amounts. Not so much in Florida, but there's massive amounts of evidence of problems with it in other states. Sure, where people go around and they help people fill out their ballots and they stuff them into ballot boxes as a group. They call it ballot harvesting. There's all kinds of problems. Not so much in Florida, but again. When you send ballots to everyone who's registered to vote, which we don't do in Florida. So I want to differentiate the Florida model from other states. But imagine anyone who'd ever been registered to vote in Florida was sent a ballot. The zone is flooded. And you know how we know there were problems? There were massively more people that voted in the 2020 presidential election in the middle of COVID, when people were scared to go outside. Massively larger numbers of voters in 2020 as 2024 because they flooded the zone with mail-in ballots and nobody knew who was actually filling them out.
But Representative, that's only indicative that more people voted. That's not indicative of fraud.
Why would more people vote in 2020 when the population was smaller than it was in 2024? It's because when you mail ballots, and again, I want to differentiate Florida from other states. We don't do that in Florida. But when you send a mail ballot, you don't know who's received it. You don't know who's completed it. You don't know who sent it back. The only security in a mail ballot is a supposed signature. It's just simply not a secure way to vote. And it's why very few countries around the world do mail-in balloting.
Let's talk about the possibility of an ICE presence at polling locations. It's been suggested multiple times at multiple levels. Is that something you would support?
Absolutely. I mean, look, any illegal immigrant who goes to a polling place should be deported. I mean, anyone who's an American has nothing to worry about. So everyone who's worried about ICE probably has a reason to be worried. But it shouldn't concern anyone. If you're an American, you have nothing to fear from ICE. So I want ICE to be, I want every single illegal immigrant deported. I don't care whether you've been here 5 minutes or 5 decades. I don't care what your reason is. If you came here illegally, you need to go home. So I support ICE being everywhere because I want every illegal deported. And I want that because I want Florida to be affordable for Floridians. I disagree with Democrats that people should pay 20% more in rent and 30% more for a house because of illegal immigrants. I just want to make affordable, and Democrats want to make people pay for illegal immigrants.
Can I ask where those figures come from?
Sure, they just came from the Federal Reserve. So if you think about it, if you've got 10, 20, 30 million people in the country who shouldn't be, and they're living in apartments and they're living in homes, that's a source of demand, and that pushes up prices. So the Federal Reserve just reported that rents were 20% higher and housing prices were 30% higher than they should be because of illegal immigrants. So I disagree. Democrats want Americans to pay a lot more for housing to support illegal immigrants. I just disagree with that.
The Federal SAVE Act has become a major part of this debate. Why do you believe requiring proof of citizenship for voter registration is necessary?
Because I don't think foreigners should vote in American elections. That shouldn't be something that's controversial. Of the two main provisions of the SAVE Act, one of them we already do in Florida, which is photo ID. And by the way, the fact that Florida can do that with over 20 million people proves it's not that big of a deal. But proof of citizenship is a big deal. And I remember my time in the legislature when there was legislation to take people off the rolls who when they got jury duty notices, called and said, I can't do jury duty. I'm not an American citizen, yet they had somehow been registered to vote. So when Democrats made the decision to register people when they went to get driver's licenses, many states give driver's licenses to people who aren't Americans. And so you can have foreigners end up on the rolls. And I think making sure that only Americans are voting in American elections is a critical thing for us to do.
The Trump administration following the 2020 election had brought more than 60 motions before courts alleging voter fraud. All but one were dismissed, and that one was a procedural motion. President Trump has identified Georgia as being a nexus of election fraud. An audit released last week found that there were 23 discrepancies out of more than 1.1 million ballots cast in that state's June 16th runoff election. And even the audit of the 2020 election conducted by House and Senate Republicans found no evidence of fraud. We know undocumented immigrants don't vote because they can't register and thus don't appear on those rolls to check in when it's voting time at the polls. So where is the voter fraud happening? Why hasn't evidence been presented that could lead to any indictments?
Well, you've conflated a lot of things there. We know that that non-Americans are registering to vote because we see that through the motor voter laws. We've seen that 4 years ago with the mass number of mail-in ballots that have come in. So to say it is mathematically impossible for the election, the number of people who cast a vote in 2024 to have gone down as far as it did. By the way, you want to know where the number of votes in 2024 didn't go down very much versus 2020? In Florida. You know why? In Florida, we never sent mail-in ballots to every single voter. So the data is there. I think people just like you will say over and over again, it didn't happen, it didn't happen, it didn't happen, in order to convince people that it never happened. But there's no question that illegals are registering to vote. There's no question that in many states, they flood the zone with mail-in ballots.
The SAVE Act is stalled in the Senate. Do you see a realistic path forward for it to pass?
I think that perhaps as part of reconciliation, we're going to make another run at it. And again, what that would require, these things are, by the way, overwhelmingly positive with Republicans, independents, and NPAs. Everyone agrees. Showing a photo ID to vote, if showing a photo ID to do anything in your life, you show photo ID 3, 4, 5 times a day, yet somehow the same Democrats who require people to show a photo ID to go to their rallies don't want people to show a photo ID to vote. Now, again, in Florida, we already require that, so it's not as big a deal. But the fact that Florida does it proves that anyone can do it. And then the other thing is requiring citizenship is simply common sense. Why would we not want people to prove they are a citizen when they register to vote? Why would we not? Now, I think there's other ways to do it. I'm okay if we want to pass a law that sends you to prison for the rest of your life if you give a driver's license to an illegal immigrant. I'm okay with that. But the problem is in blue states, they like to give illegal immigrants driver's licenses. And when you get a driver's license, you can check a box and you can register to vote. And so these same people who disrespect our country so much that they want a driver's license, even though they shouldn't be here at all, somehow we should believe they're not voting as well. These people disrespect our country. They hate our country. I not only don't want them to vote, I want to deport them all.
Critics say these policies could discourage eligible voters from participating. How do you respond to that?
They're wrong. Does showing a photo ID discourage people from going to a Democratic political rally? Does it discourage people from getting on an airplane? Does it discourage people from buying a home or renting a car or buying alcohol or any of the other 1,000 times you have to show a photo ID? And again, how does making sure you're a citizen, you know what it discourages? It discourages illegal immigrants from voting. And you know what? I fully support their discouragement.
President Trump has been consistently polling from the mid-30s to the 40s. And when it comes to approval ratings, the expectation is that this poor polling could drag down Republicans running in these midterm races. Why shouldn't voters think that the SAVE Act and these threats of ICE agent placement at polling locations is in an effort to mitigate those expected losses?
Well, I don't know how photo ID and you have to be a citizen to vote. Look, I will say this. If Democrats need illegals to vote in order to win, we should all be very, very concerned. Because again, ICE agents at polls would only scare someone who's in our country illegally. So if we're hearing, wait, if there are ICE agents at polls, if you have to show a photo ID and if you have to prove you're an American citizen to vote, Democrats will lose. It's proof that Democrats are cheating right now. None of these things will affect Americans voting, and I don't think they'll affect the outcome unless what you're saying is Democrats cheat to win.
Republican U.S. Congressman Randy Fine represents Florida's 6th congressional district. Engage is a production of Central Florida Public Media. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Richard Copeland is our senior producer. I'm Sharon Stone. You can reach us anytime with questions, comments, or story ideas. Send an email to engage@cfpublic.org. Thanks for listening.